Hi there, I'm Sam Flegal, and a question I get asked a lot is, what is the Havamal? You see, I did an illustrated version of the Havamal, this book here, and a lot of people see that at my booth at conventions or on my website at fatefulsigns.com, and they're like, the Hava what? What even is this thing? Well, the Havamal is a book that gets me really excited, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about it and hopefully get you excited about it too. So the first thing is the word Havamal means the wisdom or the sayings of the High One, the sayings of Har. Har, or the High One, is another name for Odin. So this is lore that's been passed down from Odin on high to the Viking people, to modern people, just to all of us, and it's a set of proverbs, a set of good things, a way of living one's life, and it's really great. So the version I'm using, and I used for the Illustrated Hávamál, is the Bellows translation, which is done in 1923. Bellows translated so that the poems would sound like poems. And so the Hávamál is the second book in the Poetic Edda. The Poetic Edda is 1,000-year-old Viking poetry, and it goes back to the Codex Regius, the Book of Kings, and inside are all the different sources that we have for the earliest poems that Norse mythology is based on. Even the Prose Edda, which is where we get the stories about Norse mythology, those come from the Poetic Edda being referenced as an even earlier source. So this is it. This is the earliest written form that we have, aside from a few runic grave markings and that sort of thing. It's the most complete source, and it's really cool. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from it. The first section is very much like a Poor Richard's Almanac or Proverbs. It's a set of sayings on how to lead a good life. And one of the things that fascinates me about it is that even though these were the writings of people 1,000 years ago or more in some cases, the advice is still really good stuff. So verse 1, I think, sets the tone. It's cool. So here we go. So within the gates ere a man shall go, full warily let him watch. Full long let him look about him, for little he knows where a foe may lurk and sit in the seats within. So be aware of your surroundings. You don't know if someone is waiting for you around the corner or has ill intent. I mean, I still think that's solid advice now, even as it was then. All right, and then we have verse 23. The witless man is awake all night, thinking of many things. Careworn he is when the morning comes, and his woe is just as it was. Well, yeah, I mean, even 1,000 years ago, people had crappy night's sleep, and they stayed up, and they worried about stuff. And this verse is saying, try to let that stuff go so that, you can get a good night's sleep, because a good night's sleep is important. Again, valuable still today. Then I want to share with you two of the most popular verses from the Havamal, and that's verse 77 and 78, and they perfectly sum up the Viking philosophy, the Viking way of life. Cattle die and kinsmen die, and so one dies oneself, but a noble name will never die if good renown one gets. Cattle die and kinsmen die, and so one dies oneself. One thing now that never dies is the fame of a dead man's deeds. And I mean, how cool is that? You can see there, that's the illustration I did for that particular verse. But oh man, like it just digs in this idea that we know that we are here right now, and that the things we do will be remembered by our children, by our ancestors, by the lives of those that we affect. So think very clearly about what sort of glory are you leaving in your wake? Are you going to be remembered fondly? Are you going to be remembered at all? And what does that say? And I just think that's such a positive outlook even today, of thinking about what we do now matters. What we do affects other people, and it affects the legacy that we leave behind us. So that first section is sayings of wisdom. That goes verse 1 through 79. Then we get to the second section, which are the sayings of love. I'm going to read verse 91 from the sayings on love. Clear now I speak, for I know them both. Men false to women are found. When fairest we speak, then falsest we think. Against wisdom we work with deceit. Of course, build your relationships on truth. That's an amazing advice. Who doesn't believe that advice? You think you build your relationships around lies, your world crumbles. That was true for the Vikings, and it's true for us today. Then the next section is the story of Odin and Billing's daughter. It's a collection of verses about how Odin attempts to woo a maid and go forth through all there. I'm not going to read that section. It's a cool story, but read it for yourself. You'll enjoy it. You'll get into it more. Then there's the story of Odin and the mead of song, or the mead of poetry. And to me, it's such a fascinating story because in it, Odin breaks his word. He gives his word to a giant and then breaks it in order to steal the mead of poetry. And it just gets into all this intricate stuff about when you give your word and what happens if you break it and the treachery of Odin. And again, it's just a cool story, but I think it would be better if you read it and you get into it. I think you'll dig it. The next section, verse 111 through 138, is Lodfafnir's song. And this section has a very different character and voice. But again, it's really cool. And it opens with this. It's time to chant from the chanter's stool. By the wells of earth I was. I saw and was silent. I saw and I thought. And I heard the speech of Hor. Of runes heard I words, nor were counsels wanting. At the hall of Hor, in the hall of Hor, such was the speech I heard. So there's a few things in there. So we keep saying Hor, that's H-O-R, also Har. And so the word is literally Havamal, he's translating that as the hall of Hor or the speech of Hor, Havamal. It's the name of the book. So he's saying, the speech of the High One is what he's saying. And then there's also reference to the well of earth, or the well of Erd, which is the well of fate, the well of the Norns that's at the base of the world tree. And again, I think it's so great. I just love this section because it sounds like a skald standing up before an audience and delivering this prose. I read thee, Lodfafnir, and hear thou my rede. Profits thou has if thou hearest. Great thy gain if thou learnest. Rise not at night, save if news thou seekest, or fame to the outhoused would fare. And again, it's saying, like, the reed is to say the knowledge, the wisdom, and it's passing it along. And so one of the theories about, especially the first section, to go back a little bit, one of the theories there is that this was a way for parents to pass wisdom on to their children, and because it was rhyming, they would remember the rhymes. Similar to the way that, rhymes or songs get stuck in our head, these little words of wisdom would pass down. There's even some thought that there may have been a warrior cult or a warrior society built around these phrases, this culture of a way to live one's life, to be honorable, the right way to treat women, the way to conduct oneself when at a table or around other men, and it comes through. And I just think that's really cool. And again, I love the little pieces of wisdom and the way that it connects to modern life as well. Now I'm going to read you the last verse from this section on Lodfafnir before we move on to the next. Now are Hor's words spoken, spoken in the hall, kind for the kindred of men, cursed for the kindred of giants. Hail to the speaker, to him who learns, profit be his who has them. Hail to them who hearken. And it just, I don't know, I love it. Again, it just sounds like a skald. It's such cool poetry, and I just really dig it. So then there's the story of Odin and the tale of the runes. And if you're into mythology, if you like cool stories, oh man, does this stuff, it just jumps right in. All right, listen to this. I ween that I hung on the windy tree, hung there for nights full 9. With the spear I was wounded, and offered I was to Odin, myself to myself, on the tree that none may ever know what root beneath it runs. And just, oh man, I mean, that stuff gives me chills, and I love that. The idea of Odin sacrificing himself on the tree in order to gain knowledge. Again, this is another one. I'm really pleased with my illustration. You can see that there. And Odin on the windy tree. Yeah, it's really good stuff. And then it goes on talking about the different things that he did for runes, the different wisdom. A verse that obviously I'm a really big fan of here, verse 143. Runes shalt you find, and fateful signs that the king of singers colored, and the mighty gods have made. Full strong the signs, full mighty the signs, that the ruler of the gods doth write. And so, oh man, like again, really good stuff. When they're saying the king of singers colored, they would actually bleed on their runes, coloring them red. And that's, you know, what makes the runes yours. It binds you to them, ties your fate to them, was the belief. And see, you know, you can see fateful signs in the runes. And for me, that was such a moving passage that that's actually what I call my series about Norse mythology, is called Fateful Signs. And that's right here in the book. You know, that, again, that's what inspired me, and I think you'll dig it. It'll inspire you too. And then the last section of the book is just a list of charms. It lists out basically all the things Odin is saying that he knows how to do, all this Odinic sorcery that is something that he knows, that it does hint that perhaps you could know it too, or if you studied or found the lore, but it's a bit of kind of bragging to close at the end. So here's an example of one of Odin's charms, verse 158. This would be his 12th charm as he's going down the list. A 12th I know, if high on a tree I see a hanged man swing, so do I write and color the runes, that forth he fares and to me he talks. There are many references to consulting the dead in Norse mythology for magical knowledge, and Odin, being the gallows god or the god of hanged men, was also thought that he had the power to talk to them. And there's all sorts of stories throughout of Scandinavian sources, throughout Viking lore, about either sitting underneath a hanged man in order to learn wisdom, or that you could use a recently dead person to essentially be your fetch that separates you from your mortal self here and transcends into the other world where the secrets lie, where the dead are, and that you can bring that knowledge here, gaining wisdom. And this is just another example of Odin acting in that role as the Odinic sorcerer. And that's basically it. I mean, you have, you know, such a cool section. And I want to be clear that while I've done an illustrated version of this book that I'm really excited about, and if you want a beautiful copy, my wife did the graphic design for this. It's really well done. I'm very proud of it. But you can also get this for free online. You see, the Bellows translation of the Havamal was done in 1923. That means it's in the public domain, and there are a number of sources. So if you are interested in reading the Havamal for yourself, just search online, go ahead and type out Havamal Bellows, or just type out Havamal, and you'll find an online version that you can start reading and start thinking about. One of the things I love about Bellows' version as well is he includes notes throughout to explain why he translated certain things, or explain where the story is referencing another section of the Poetic Edda and referencing another part of Norse mythology, so that you can feel clued in and fully understand the story. And I find that the more you read it, the more you get into it, the more you understand, and it just opens up this world of Norse mythology that, for me at least, is very exciting. So that's why I think the Havamal is so cool. It's why I think you'll enjoy it. And if you just take the time to read and really dig in, I think you're going to have a lot of fun with the Wisdom of Odin, and it might just give you some things to think about. I'd recommend read just one of the verses a day and think about how does that apply to modern life, or read one of the stories and think about what does that mean to you? How does it affect you today? And then what I get excited about is that then connects you back to the ancestral memory of humanity, to this older way, to a wisdom that's not been lost because it was recorded and translated for us, and we get to access it today, but apply it to our modern lives. And that's the Havamal. I'm Sam Flegal. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can find the Illustrated Hávamál and even more Viking art from my Fateful Signs series over at fatefulsigns.com. You can get a PDF of the first chapter from the Illustrated Hávamál by signing up for the mailing list over at fatefulsigns.com. If Norse mythology and art gets you as excited as it gets me, then let me suggest that you become a member of the Fateful Signs Patreon at patreon.com/samflegal. You'll get a deep dive into the process behind making art and some other cool rewards like prints, videos, original art, and even a hangout that we do once a month. Thank you so much. I hope the runes fall in your favor and bring you fateful signs.